my parents suggested that my brother should take over my house because, as a single man in my early 30s without a family, a reason that I didn't need it. Meanwhile, my brother, who is 29, already has 4 children. His family dynamic has always been complex. His wife, my sister-in-law, tends to provoke me and then play the victim, which causes tension between us. Despite knowing her true nature, my parents and brother adore her. She's attractive, but her behavior makes her unappealing to me. Financially, my brother's family relies on my parents, as my sister-in-law refuses to work despite having a college degree. My mother helps with the children, and they all live together in my parents' cramped 3-bedroom house, which was built in the 1960s. During our upbringing, my brother was favored, and any attempt to stand up to him was met with punishment, while his actions went unchecked. This favoritism led to resentment, and my brother often bullied me and received no repercussions. We eventually moved away to avoid scrutiny from nosy relatives, only seeing our parents occasionally. After turning 18, I moved out, relieved to escape their control. Despite losing my job and my home during the pandemic, I remained resilient, downsizing to a camper on my truck. I intended to park it temporarily at my parents' house, where my brother still resides. However, circumstances forced me to live in it longer than anticipated. When I approached my parents for temporary accommodation, they declined, citing a full house and strained relations over the past decade. Their condition for allowing me to park my camper on their property was exorbitant rent, equivalent to a local apartment. Feeling disheartened, I had to fend for myself, parking my camper in a store parking lot for the night. Feeling vulnerable and anxious, unable to seek refuge with other relatives or friends, I resorted to a nomadic lifestyle, facing various challenges including confrontations with strangers and struggles to find stable electricity sources for my camper. Despite receiving unemployment benefits, I longed for stability and a steady job. Eventually, I secured employment in a neighboring city and found refuge in the back lot of the company's building, where I lived in my camper, supported by my understanding boss. Though unconventional, my arrangement with my employer provided me with a sense of security, albeit with challenges like finding shower facilities and enduring extreme weather conditions. Despite the hardships, I persevered, earning overtime pay and gaining valuable skills. With determination, I climbed the career ladder, eventually landing a supervisory position and a better salary. Empowered by my newfound stability, I set out to find a permanent home. After an extensive search, I purchased a manufactured home close to my workplace, signaling an end to my nomadic lifestyle. However, my newfound happiness was short-lived when my family, having discovered my address, invaded my privacy unannounced. Their intrusive behavior disrupted my newfound peace, leaving me feeling violated and disrespected. I'm sorry to hear about the situation you're dealing with. It sounds incredibly frustrating to have your own family members trying to pressure you into giving up your home. It's commendable that you stood your ground and asserted your right to your own space. It's important to prioritize your own well-being and not let others manipulate or guilt trip you into doing something you're not comfortable with. Keep holding on to that backbone and standing up for yourself. I'm really sorry to hear that your family is continuing to disrespect your boundaries and invade your space. It's completely unacceptable for them to disregard your wishes and try to move into your home without your consent. It's clear that they are not respecting you as an individual with your own rights and autonomy. It's good that you're standing your ground and not letting them manipulate or guilt trip you into giving up your home. It might be necessary to involve legal authorities at this point to ensure that your rights are protected and that they cannot continue to infringe upon your property. Remember that you have every right to enforce your boundaries and protect yourself from their attempts to take advantage of you. Don't hesitate to reach out for support from friends, legal counsel, or other trusted individuals who can help you navigate this difficult situation. Enraged by her audacity, I retreated to my truck to call the police, but as soon as she realized my intentions, my sister-in-law began pounding on my window, desperately pleading for me to stop. She argued that she and Dan needed the house, attempting to guilt-trip me into compliance. Ignoring her, I defiantly asserted that it was my house, not Dan's, and refused to yield to her demands. Frustrated, she threatened to vandalize my truck unless I relented, but I stood my ground, warning her of the legal consequences she would face if she dared to damage my property. Smart enough to realize the severity of the situation, she backed off when the police arrived. Inside the house, Dan and my sister-in-law had barricaded themselves along with their children. I recounted the entire ordeal to the authorities, providing them with evidence of my rightful ownership of the property. It was then that I noticed the broken lock and the drill lying next to it, a clear indication of their attempted break-in. As I narrated the events to the police, my parents arrived, immediately resorting to lies in a feeble attempt to justify their actions. Dan and my sister-in-law emerged from the house, smirking arrogantly as they brandished a fake rental agreement. However, their triumph was short-lived when I pointed out the obvious discrepancies in the document. It was a poorly executed attempt at fraud, and I made it clear to them that I wouldn't hesitate to pursue legal action if they persisted in their deceitful ways. My threat struck fear into Dan, who paled at the prospect of losing his job and facing the consequences of their actions. Despite my mother's futile attempts to intervene, I remained resolute in my determination to protect my property and uphold my rights. It was a blatant display of entitlement and manipulation, but I refused to be swayed by their deceitful tactics. In the end, justice prevailed, and I emerged victorious, reclaiming control of my home and asserting my autonomy in the face of adversity. My sister-in-law's audacity knew no bounds. She suggested I sacrifice my comfort for Dan's sake, offering to live in my camper so they could have the house. Enraged, I retorted that if she thought it was such a grand idea, she should do it herself and let Dan have her house. As I dialed the police, she pounded on my truck window, begging me to stop, but I stood my ground, refusing to yield to her manipulation. When the police arrived, they found Dan and my sister-in-law barricaded in my house. I presented evidence of my ownership, including a recent driver's license with my address. Amidst the chaos, my parents arrived, fabricating lies about a supposed rental agreement, but their crude forgery was easily debunked, and I warned them of the legal repercussions they faced. The situation escalated further when Dan and my sister-in-law emerged with crocodile tears, clutching fake rental papers. Their pitiful attempt at emotional manipulation fell flat in the face of the law. Frustrated and defeated, my family retreated, realizing they couldn't force me to bend to their will. But their defeat was short-lived as they crashed my Christmas Eve party. Uninvited and unwelcome, their intrusion sparked a family intervention, with relatives chastising them for their past actions. Despite their pleas and tears, my resolve remained unshaken. The party resumed, with music and laughter filling the air. Despite the chaos, I found solace in the warmth of my relatives' support. As the night drew to a close, I reflected on the tumultuous events of the past year. Though challenges lay ahead, I felt a sense of liberation, knowing I had stood up for myself and reclaimed control of my life. In the days that followed, my family kept their distance, realizing they couldn't manipulate me any longer. I found peace in the quiet moments, savoring the freedom of my newfound independence. And as I looked to the future, I embraced the possibility of new beginnings, including the prospect of romance and adventure. Though the road ahead may be uncertain, I face it with courage and determination, knowing that I am stronger than I ever thought possible. And as I close this chapter, I do so with gratitude for the love and support of my family and the unwavering strength that lies within.